sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that wants to get interpersonal with your neurobiology. Thank you. I'm Christy Powell. My co-host tonight is part complex mammal, part cyborg, Vila Bianca.
Hello, everyone.
And joining us again is Annette James, a trauma-informed certified life coach, here to casually introduce us to just a little bit of evolutionary psychology and interpersonal neurobiology, all in her spare time. Annette, thanks so much for being here again.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So I'm actually very excited for this episode because I will be learning right along with the audience for the most part. If you are interested in what we're talking about here, or if you have questions in general about sex, love, romance, gender identity, any of that whole big bucket worth of stuff, feel free to call the show at 512-991-9242. Or if you want to do so on your computer from anywhere in the world for free, you can call us at tiny.cc/callsex.
All right, well, let's jump right into it. Annette, I am fascinated by the fact that both Darwin and Freud, early on in their careers, did pioneering research on the vagus nerve and sort of started to develop some of these ideas before, getting distracted by these like scientifically defining ideas that they came to later. I'm really curious how you discovered polyvagal theory and how you came to some of this.
Well, polyvagal theory, I guess I should say that when I first started in the mental health field, you immediately think psychology. So if I was told later that I was going to be needing to know more neurobiology and neuroscience, I would have probably said, yeah, right. And that really was the case when I was going through my college courses for my degree work and everything. We do learn a lot about psychology, and of course that has to do with Freud and Darwin, and so we learned all these bits and pieces. My knowledge of polyvagal theory actually didn't come into existence for me until I was actually already starting to work in the field. Once I started working in the field of mental health, I was actually working with youth. And because of that, I was introduced to the ACEs model, which is the adverse childhood experiences. And what that comes down to is childhood trauma. So once I started getting introduced into more trauma work, and I did have a little trauma work when I was going through my degree work, it was more historical trauma, more generational trauma and that type of stuff. But not really getting into really the meat of trauma until afterwards. I then had to put myself back through school to learn more about emotional trauma, and that was where my certification through that came up. But it was during that I discovered polyvagal theory, and the way Porges kind of brought that a little bit more into focus. Because prior to him, it really was just our nervous system was looked at as a binary system. It was either stress on or stress off. And he was able to say, but wait a minute, we have trauma here, and trauma just didn't fit into that model of binary. So with his theory and his evolution, he realized with the evolutionary patterns, it started making things come together and make sense. So that was kind of my introduction into polyvagal. It really wasn't until much later when I started learning more about trauma.
Yeah, exploring science that doesn't fit into a binary model. This is very much right down secular sexuality's lane.
There you go.
Obviously, we're not equipped to provide everybody watching this with an associate's level understanding of neurobiology tonight, and there's a lot to cover. So I'm hoping you can kind of walk us through the evolution of the vagus nerve and sort of the hierarchy that goes along with that.
We do have, there's a lot there. I'll
Sure.
try to break it down the best I can, and to be a little bit just not get so in depth, because you can easily go down so much with a lot of this. So it can definitely get to be sometimes a little bit overbearing for some people, and you kind of get a little lost. So I try to keep it a little bit simple here, because we're looking at an evolutionary gap between about 200 million years old and 500 million years old. And so, again, like I said earlier, originally it was just meant, our nervous system was looked at as really, our autonomic nervous system was just that of a binary. It was either sympathetic on or parasympathetic on. You were either at rest or you were either at stressed. So when the polyvagal theory kind of came into play, we now had that was when it was discovered that we really had a third circuitry, and that brings in that ventral vagal, which is all about that social. It brings the social aspect into play. And I should state that when we're talking about polyvagal theory, and we're going to be hearing things like the vagus nerve, people are kind of thinking, wait, this doesn't make sense. These are two different things. Poly really is just about many. Vagal is referring to the vagus nerve. So you'll see that our vagus nerves runs from the base of our skull down, and it does branch out into many different pieces. So that's kind of where the thought is on polyvagal. And this, of course, is a theory about that. And so it all kind of goes with our nervous system, and it all kind of entails the evolution of our autonomic nervous system, which originally, like I mentioned, was either sympathetic or parasympathetic, which is your fight, flight, or your rest and digest. So this kind of took it to that new level. Broke it down, I should say, into those three levels. So in that hierarchy level, we're going to start at the very top of the level, which is our newest system. It's that about 200 million years old, and it is all about social engagement. This is very much just a mammalian thing as well. It's kind of specifically to the mammalian group. And so again, it comes with that social aspect to it. So what this is doing is, it's kind of, I should have probably gone the other direction, but because what happens is in this state, this is a great state. This is the state where we are happy, where we are functioning. The world around us is safe. We look for social cues in our life when we're entering parties, when we're entering environments. Our brains are automatically kind of searching for those social cues, because evolution, through our evolution from as far back as what we're going to go down here on this ladder of about 5 million years old, it's all about keeping us safe. So for years and years and years, it's really our nervous system has been set up to keep us safe. So what happens is in the newest circuitry, this vagal form, it really is not only just about keeping us safe, but we're keeping safe with others. And our bodies are searching for those cues. Now, our vagus nerve kind of controls a lot of our facial features. So what it's doing is, this is where we see those facial expressions, maybe a tone of voice, maybe we're listening with a different type of an ear. So we're searching for those cues to, is this safe? Is this a good environment for me to be in? And later on, we talk about a little bit more about co-regulation, and that's kind of where this kind of comes in, because you want that safe zone. So, again, this is that happiness zone. This is great things are happening. We're good. We're calm. This is that fantastic, sweet zone we would like to stay in, but that's not reality, unfortunately. And reality is, a lot of us dip into this next zone, which is the sympathetic activation. This is your flight, fright. This is where a lot of anxiety rests. This is where a lot of anger and frustration it kind of is. So as we are going through our days and you're hitting those challenges and those stressors and things, that's going to put us into that level. So we've now slipped out of that calm and rest and relaxation level, and now we're being activated. Those internal alarms are being set off because, again, through our evolutionary system, this was our fight flight. This is all designed to keep us safe. Back in the caveman days, you know, our ancestors and stuff were out there running around, and, you know, they needed to know if they saw a wild animal at them or something like that, their body needs to be able to protect them and respond in such a way. So that's exactly what it did. It would ready their body to either stay and fight or to get ready to flee. You get that increased heart rate, you get that increased, you know, that shallow breathing. Maybe the muscles are getting ready to either tense up so that you can again fight or flee. During this time of that type of the system, when those alarms are going off, your body is being flooded with cortisol and flooded with adrenaline, and our bodies just aren't meant to stay in this state. It becomes overwhelmed and becomes short-circuited. So that's when that drops us down into that final bottom level, which is the dorsal vagal, and the dorsal vagal shutdown. It is our oldest, most primitive piece of the vagal system and or of the nervous system. And what that does is that comes in as a self-preservation, and that's going to shut you down. It's going to take your system and say, you've overloaded it. We're going to shut you down so that you can go ahead and get that rest, get that restoration. And this is where we see a lot of people in the depressive state. This is where we see people have kind of gone inwards and kind of shut down or have disassociated. Back in the, 500 million years ago, the animals and stuff that were, and the life organisms that were happening in this time, they were very, this was a life preserving time for them. And they just kind of, they're weren't very active or anything like that. And it was also a thought of, if I make myself small, if I make myself not move very much, I'm going to be safe. So it's kind of that same thing now. And so even though we are now in a today's world, much of those levels still are within us. Our nervous system still very much protects us every day, whether or not the threat is actually real or not. All your body knows is that I'm feeling a certain stress, or I'm feeling a certain fear, or whatever it might be. And so it immediately will jump to, well, now we've got to fight or flight, or now we've got to freeze this system. And that all comes all the way back from our evolutionary past, millions of years ago, is still very much part of our life today. And so this is why sometimes people will react a certain way to different stressors and not really understand the reason why. So, and they're just their body's natural biological, neurological pieces coming out. It's just trying to keep us safe.
Well, so then complex mammals have this really sophisticated system. I think you can make the argument that this is how apes came to dominate the world, where we alternate between, I guess, these like three primary modes of operation.
Yeah.
What does that mean for how humans function or function with one another?
Looking back, well, it plays a lot with how we function and how we interact with others, and that is what becomes our stressors. So we're looking at that evolutionary hierarchy, and our body again is trying to keep us safe, but sometimes it's keeping us either too safe to where we don't engage with others, or sometimes we look at others as a threat, even though they might not be, but because of our own past. And for me, I deal a lot with trauma. So for me, it's a lot of people who might have some unresolved trauma in their past that is keeping them in that awareness zone of, this is not a safe place for me to be. I need to, either leave or I need to disassociate or whatever. So they become now non-functioning humans in society or with partners or anything like that. And it's not necessarily a character flaw within them. It's just something has happened to them. And what we say in trauma is it's not what's wrong with somebody, it's what has happened to somebody.
Mm.
And there's a big difference in that, because we often will sit there and say, what is wrong with you? Why can't you just, it's just a party, or it's just we're just going out for this. But what they might not realize is they have something in their past that has occurred that was never resolved or whatnot, and that becomes a different stressor upon them. Their body reacts in such a way. So if your body is reacting in that way, you're not going to be able to function in society. You're not going to be able to function very well with a partner or get along with others. As well as if you are, if you're good and you are able to self-regulate and you've had all that within you, then you are able to work well with others. I always look at people who are having a hard time functioning with others, maybe in the workplace or even with partners. Those that I work with, the first thing I go to is something that we've learned in psychology, and that is attachment theory. How were you brought up? How were you raised? Were you tended to when your needs were needed, when you had needs? Were you over tended to where you just, expect things to be your way? Or were you just kind of left in abandonment? You kind of had to fend for yourself. And so a lot of these things are within us, and it really affects how we function as humans, and not only just on our own, but within society. We are social creatures. We are supposed to be working within a society and within an environment. And for a lot of people, it's just not safe. And like we've mentioned earlier, we've got that vagus, the vagus nerves going on, and especially that ventral vagus that was in charge of those facial features and things of that nature. So we're constantly, again, on that scan. Is it safe for me to be here? Am I going to be accepted here? And if you don't have that acceptance, if you don't have that safety, you're not going to engage. You're going to disconnect, and it's going to become this, well, maybe they just don't want to be here, or maybe, you start getting these false, people start coming up with different things about you, or, it turns into this big blow up thing. So really understanding our nervous system, how it works, how that comes out as behavior, can help us function in society, or it's going to take people and keep them in their homes, not going to want to function, disassociate, kind of collapse in. So
Yeah, broadly speaking, what are some of the levers that kind of push and pull us from one mode to another? I heard you mention safety is kind of the hallmark of all of this, but how does that operate for somebody to move from that, ventral vagal, sympathetic, and then dorsal vagal kind of state?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. Everybody is different, and knowing that is going to be really key. And so you've got a couple of different things that we're dealing with. You can either self-regulate yourself or co-regulate yourself. And that co-regulation happens when we're up there in that ventral vagal. And what happens is, if you are co-regulating with somebody, that means you have somebody else or maybe multiple people that you're it's that extra support system. And what happens is you kind of can help each other out with bringing you back, maybe up from that activation mode that's going on. If you've dipped down into the sympathetic activation, having somebody there to kind of help you and support and be somebody who's up in that vagal system already, the ventral vagal ladder, they can pull you back up. The problem becomes is if you keep on tumbling down, and now you're down at the very bottom at dorsal vagal, you don't skip zones. You kind of have to still pass up and down through them. So then that becomes a really difficult time sometimes. If you're so far down, you can still get pulled up, but it's going to be a longer process. It's going to be a little bit tougher. And also you can do those Self-regulation. This is stuff like yoga, meditation, breathing, to kind of help self-regulate you so that you can, and part of it really is knowing, knowing what your body's doing. Am I slipping into a stressor response? Am I going into sympathetic activation? And if I am, what am I going to do for it? I know that meditation or mindfulness, or I know I need to take a few breaths and that'll pull me out. And again, that safetiness of that co-regulation. Who do I have in my support system? Who can I go to help me possibly get out of where I'm headed? So really relying on those pieces to help you move. And it all comes down to knowing your body, and what works for you. Also knowing what it is you're going through. Sometimes people know that if I have the following stressors, I know that this is what works for me, or I know this is who I can go to. It's something that we talk about in resiliency, is having those those support systems in play, to where I know that if I'm here, I need to make sure that this person or this tool is nearby to help pull me out. It's like being at a party and you are in ventral vagal and you are fantastic and doing great. And now somebody has come through and maybe bumped you, and now you've spilt your drink. It's all over, a couch or your clothing or something like that. You immediately start getting angry, stressed out. Oh my gosh, what's going on? This whole thing is now a disaster. And so now you've entered into that sympathetic activation mode. Those stressors are coming on, those internal alarms are activating. So now it's, what do you do with this? Do I self-regulate myself to bring myself back up? Most likely at a party, we're going to have that engagement. We're co-regulating now with somebody. So we're going to have somebody possibly who's going to be coming in and saying, hey, listen, I'm sorry that this happened. I will help you. I will, let's go get you changed. I will help you clean this area and stuff. So they're now coming in and helping you regulate. They're helping pull you back up into ventral vagal. What ends up happening sometimes, though, if that didn't happen and you continue to stress over it and you go deeper and deeper and deeper down, now you're so far down, it's not impossible to get back up, but it definitely is a little bit more tougher to get back up from that. And you might take extra time to do so. But it can be done. And that's kind of how you shift up and down throughout your, throughout that ladder, so to speak. But it really comes down to, you have to know what's going on in yourself. You have to know what's going on in your body. What are those feelings and sensations of those stress moments? When I'm feeling stressed, when I know I'm slipping into sympathetic activation, I can feel certain things, maybe certain trembling or certain tightness in your chest. Maybe there is, you're going to feel that increased heart rate. That anxiety is going to start creeping in. So when people start recognizing that these are stress activation pieces, and these are those internal alarms that are going off, people can then catch themselves. And if they have done their work and they know, this is what happens, this is what I need to do, this is that tool I need to grab, then they can help get themselves out of that. And if you do that long enough, I am proof. If you do this long enough, your body just all of a sudden starts automatically kind of doing it on its own. My body will automatically start slipping into that sympathetic activation with something, and it immediately kicks in and immediately tells me, nope, you're fine. You know that this is not what's really happening. You know that this is not that time or that place or that case or whatever it is. My body automatically now just kicks in, and it's because it's with constant work and that I've been able to it's kind of train yourself. It's kind of that Pavlovian, experience where, my body now just knows. So it pretty much self-regulates itself on its own. But it does take some time to do that, but it can be done. And, so.
Is that kind of a result of neuroplasticity? I know when I was talking with therapists in the past, I had thought patterns that would kind of bump me a little bit down that ladder. And the term that was used for me and for my therapist was neuroplasticity. Can we talk just very briefly about that and kind of how that intersects with this theory?
Do you want me to do it, or Christy, or
either of you would be more qualified than I. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'll jump in very quickly just to say that when we're talking about trauma, we are talking about those kind of Pavlovian associations. We tend to have sort of this like burned, deeply ingrained experience when something overwhelming happens to us, and that can cause us to get a little bit stuck there. And so neuroplasticity is just this idea that our nervous system doesn't need to be stuck, or rather to say our body has an ability to rewire itself and come up with new connections, but that requires a little bit of effort, a little bit of repetition. As Annette was talking about repetition, the term that I often use with my clients when I'm discussing a lot of these ideas is just mental muscle memory. When you go through that routine, when you go through that pattern over and over and over, you notice yourself starting to slip down, starting to become more closed off, more cold, more rigid, more stuck. By intentionally and knowingly pushing against that bit by bit by bit, that impulse to push back becomes more deeply ingrained than the initial trauma through time. And neuroplasticity is really just the ability to do that, the ability to rewire our nervous systems based on new criteria, based on new situations. So, Annette, I know that these are really complex ideas. I use a lot of these ideas in my practice, and I love the way that you walked us through it. I definitely want to talk a little bit more about some of the co-regulation pieces and a little bit more of the sex and secular sexuality, because this is a huge part of how we relate to one another and how we form partnerships and communicate and everything else. Before we do that, though, Via, I'd love to jump on the phones.
Absolutely.
Who do you think we should start with?
Let's start with Sam in England, because I know that they were talking earlier today about calling in, and I'm excited they did. Hi, Sam. Welcome.
Hello.
Hey, what can we help you with tonight?
So I have decided that this Christmas, if anyone asks me about anything related to sexuality, gender, whatever, I'm just coming out and explaining to them, but I'm not sure how to go about that. And now I'm going to my mum's house for Christmas Day, and my mum knows, and my eldest younger sister knows, but my other small siblings and my nana do not know, and they will be there.
Okay. Wow, well,
forgive me if I missed it. What is it that they don't know? What is it that you are perhaps coming out as?
Potential things are queer, non-binary, and non-Christian.
Oof, so a whole host of things.
The trifecta. Yeah.
Yeah.
The trifecta. Oh, my
Happy
goodness.
holidays.
Yeah. And so it's mainly the sexuality and gender thing I think I'm concerned about. I'm comfortable enough in religious beliefs that I can have that one out if needs be. But it's just, I've been told wear what's comfortable, and while that's fine, what's comfortable is very androgynous clothes that are both masculine and feminine. And that'll freak my nana out a bit if she notices. So I'm just a bit, if she brings it up at the dinner table, do I try and have it out there, or do I tell her wait till afterwards, or what do I do?
Yeah.
What your thoughts might be.
That's, I mean, first of all, congratulations. It's a relief to realize that, oh, this is I'm going to come out. Like, this is a thing, this is a conversation that's going to happen. And that by itself is probably somewhat of a relief to know that that's going to, one way or another, come out. In terms of when it happens, I'm almost of the mind that if you can, try and find a way to bring it up on your own terms, as opposed to leaving it for someone else to bring up, because then you're going to be on edge the whole time, right? And it's always going to be every conversation. Oh, is this it? Am I going to be doing it now? Is this going to be it? Whereas if you kind of say, okay, Christmas Eve, after this activity, before this one, I'm going to take some people and set them down and just say, hey, just wanted to let you know something, and then just have that out on your own terms. But I also understand that that might be a leap that you're not quite ready to take, and it might be easier to wait for someone to ask. Why have you decided to wait for someone to ask as opposed to maybe just sit everyone down and have at them?
I don't want to stir shit too much, I guess. But if it comes up in conversation, I've decided that I don't have the spoons to hide it. I'd rather explain it to someone and ignore Facebook for a week.
Fair strategy. Yeah. You know, I think it is worth remembering that these conversations can be incredibly difficult. You know, if we're talking about spoon theory and this idea of just running out of gas and just not having the energy to put forth an effort on something like this, I want to remind you that you don't owe it to anybody to come out, that it's not your obligation to do so. And I feel like you know that, but I think it's really worth repeating. That being said, if you are ready to live authentically as yourself and to express yourself, we're totally all for it. I think the important thing here is just to remember that while you're expressing yourself, that people will understand or not understand. They will care or they will not care. They'll be angry or not angry. And ultimately, the thing that you have control over is yourself in this situation. And honestly, part of that means the ability to remove yourself from that situation if that's necessary for you. And I just want to make sure that you recognize the exit doors that you have and the permission you have to take care of yourself through this process.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am usually the queer friend everyone else comes to with weird questions. So I am familiar enough with it. It's just I'm too emotionally entangled here to maybe think straight about how to do it. And I think that was what I was trying to recognize, that maybe a second opinion's a good idea here. And my escape route is basically where I'm living at the moment. It's 20 minutes down the road from my mum's house, so I can just walk home.
That's good. That is good. And that is always an option. That is always something you are free to do at any point. Yeah, I mean, Christy is right about this. This is ultimately for you, right? This is ultimately your decision that you are making because you have decided that it's time for whatever reason. And what that might look like could be a big announcement. It could be a conversation over dinner. It could just be very offhand, very not a big deal at all. That's not my pronouns, or something as simple as, oh, I understand you made a mistake. Let me correct you, and then let's move on. We don't need to talk about this anymore unless you want to. And then if they come at you with more questions, then that's an opportunity to, explain things. But it doesn't even need to be a big conversation. If you treat it like, oh, well, no, this is just who I am. And I understand you might have confused that. But now the record's straight, and let's continue on talking about, the Queen's Gambit or whatever it is that might be talked about. Does that seem like it might be an option?
That seems like it could probably be an option. The only thing where I might stumble with that is if I accidentally bring something about on myself by mentioning the fact I have multiple partners.
Oh, yes, that that would be another conversation as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for the day I go home for a holiday and bring like multiple partners with me and just blow everybody's minds.
I mean, it's a great way to make sure you've got backup and to get the job done all on itself. It's nice to have a prop, so it's not just like I'm theoretically dating somebody. They're right here, and they would like to argue with you if you decide to be a dick.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, one of my partners is in the US, so less of an option for them. But for the others, absolutely, they would probably have a ball with that. And it'll be interesting to see the reaction that gets, I think.
Honestly, Sam, there are multiple paths here. We've already gone through maybe 3 or 4. I think ultimately I want to say, talk about your life and who you are with the same ease and expecting the same level of obvious understanding and respect that anyone else does, right? And that is ultimately what you're going to hope for, I would imagine, is to be able to say, oh yeah, my partners did this fun thing the other day, and people just accepting that and respecting your choices to have multiple partners or to identify as non-binary or whatever that looks like for you. Treating it as normal as anything else is not only a great kind of subtle rebellious thing to do, which I get a lot of joy out of myself, but also a great way to model what it looks like to be in an open and accepting community and be able to say, hey, this is who I am, and this is just my life. This isn't me acting out. This isn't me like trying to get attention. This is just me talking about, what goes on in my day with the same kind of approach that you would talk about yours.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to go about it, really. I should bear that in mind. My only concern with that is that my nana runs a evangelical church, and she flipped out the other week because my little sister's boyfriend was wearing pink socks.
Oh, well.
So you've got a lot to work with. Yeah, it sounds a little bit.
So what you're saying is
exhausting.
you're going to show up in pink socks, is what?
Yeah,
you're saying.
Just go ahead.
Possibly.
Start it out. Yeah.
Oh boy, my family's going to be a whole thing when I get around to all of them because most of my family run churches.
Yeah, I think the key to V's strategy here is really just to treat these aspects of your identity the same way you would any other aspect of your identity. Like, oh, you didn't know that I'm a baker? You didn't know that I happen to work in this industry, or that I'm a big hiker or jogger or whatever else? These are just pieces of who you are. And I don't say that at all to diminish their importance or to diminish their value to you. But I think that the key here is really to not see this as a opportunity for a fight or to go out and learn people some good information, but to just see this as talking about yourself and sharing your identity with people that you care about.
Yeah. I imagine that'll go down as well as the rest of the things I'm interested in: Dungeons and Dragons, kink, hypnosis, etc. And
well, I mean, there you go. That's kind of your answer to an extent. Like, the extent that they're going to care about these issues and the way that they're going to feel about these issues is largely tied to the way they feel about you and your identity. And if they have no interest in talking to you about Dungeons and Dragons or football or whatever else you might be interested to talk about, that's just part of being in a society. I think that you can express these things without turning them into a lightning rod. And I recognize the danger there, but let me encourage you to be yourself.
And it's also very easy from like a communication perspective to de-escalate things if they aren't already escalated, right? If you're like, I have something I want to say, and then you dive into this thing expecting that backlash, then that backlash is going to come and be looked at as a reasonable response. But if you just talk in a normal way about your normal life, somebody giving you backlash for that can simply be met with, I was just talking about my life. Why are you so, like, this is just who I am. Like, just let me do my thing and I'll let you do your thing. We'll respect each other. And that might not, completely diffuse the situation. In fact, if your Nana is upset about pink socks, probably that won't, be the end of the conversation. But it might make it a lot easier for your younger siblings, for example, to kind of normalize it in their heads and also see the backlash as unrealistic or unacceptable in that instance. So this is not just about you and your Nana. This is about everyone else in the family witnessing that interaction and siding with you.
Yeah, that's fair. And hopefully, if I do bring it up, there won't be too much of an issue because one of my siblings is 3 years old, and them being a Christian family, I suspect they may have an issue with me trying to teach them about non-binary people.
How dare you share more information? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and they may. And if this turns into a lecture, it'll really quickly turn into an argument, which is why I sort of like the path that we've laid out here. But it's definitely going to be sort of up to you in that moment to figure out how safe you feel, how heard you feel, and what you feel is worth the spoons, is worth the energy to put into this process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that through this discussion, the kind of method that's been suggested is the one I would probably have suggested to anyone else. I just couldn't think of it by myself.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's fair
Oh,
to
you
say.
always need a sounding board. Nobody can get there themselves when it's their own life. Absolutely. makes sense.
Co-regulation. Primates are social creatures.
There you go.
Awesome. All right.
I'm kind of about polyvagal theory, so I'm going to grab a whiskey, sit back, and listen to the rest of this.
Sounds good to me. Thanks for
Glad to hear
calling
it.
in, Sam. And good luck.
All right, no worries. Good to chat to you. Cheers. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, I know we have a few more calls on the line, but there's a lot that I really want to jump into here. So if we can, I'd like to ask Annette a few more questions, and then we'll turn back to the phones. Yeah?
Sounds good to me.
Sure.
Awesome. Annette, I know you touched on this a little bit, but I am really curious about how co-regulation works between people. I recognize that, complex mammals are much more social creatures. Often when I talk about these ideas, I'll sort of compare my experiences of going to the dog park versus going to a pond where a bunch of turtles might be like in the same place, and they might be working together to an extent, and they're all definitely around one another, but they're like tripping all over each other and literally standing on top of one another, like not especially aware or concerned with the relationship between them. And I'd love to just hear how this works between humans.
Exactly. And I have to agree with you. I have the same type of thing. I am probably the worst person to go to the zoo with. I will just tell you that. Because I spend my whole time analyzing especially the apes and the chimps and the gorillas and orangutans and all of them.
Okay, so
They
when
are my
COVID is
favorite to
over,
watch.
once COVID is over, can we please have a zoo trip with Annette as a secular sexuality
Yeah.
outing episode?
Really,
'Cause
episode? Yeah,
I'd be down.
Really, I mean, I'm telling you, I really I love it because you get to see that social interaction. And we've seen from, if you go to the zoo, or if, even just documentaries and things of that nature that have been done in the past, where you see and you learn about, especially the ape population, how they are helping each other, and they work together to do things. They groom each other. Again, that's that co-regulation, because what co-regulation really is it's harmonizing our nervous systems. You can think of it as, if you know anything, if anybody knows anything about music, if you pluck a string on a guitar or strike a chord on a piano or something, it starts to vibrate. And after a few seconds or whatnot, the other strings next to it are going to start vibrating as well. They're resonating together. And that's exactly what co-regulation does with our nervous system. It starts to kind of harmonize together. And so that's why when we talk about regulation, we're getting our nervous system back in good zone mode, back into that ventral vagal, or that parasympathetic rest and restore mode, the calmness. So that's why when you're finding things that you can do to regulate yourself with co-regulation, that co-piece is just another person. So you have another person there who can help calm you. This is why sometimes you'll hear people in relationships saying that, they might be somebody who's very high stressed, very high anxiety, but my partner calms me. And that's that co-regulation happening without them really even probably realizing what's really happening. It's those nervous systems coming together and kind of working together to harmonize, and they harmonize in, hopefully, if you've got somebody who's in a good ventral vagal state, you're going to harmonize up to their state as well. So it's coming together, and that's that social aspect that we talk about with polyvagal, and that's what we brought in with that ventral vagal piece, is that social connection. And like I mentioned earlier, we are entering into environments or into family situations like Sam just had here, where we were able to, you immediately start, your brain will immediately start scanning for that safety and acceptance, to see, am I safe to be here? Is this going to be a place that's going to help me? And this also helps with those support systems that we have in place. And again, if you've got somebody who, if you've got a partner, or if you've got a family, a friend or even a coworker who can help calm you down, so to speak, when you are in need, just by nearly being with you, kind of sitting with you. And one thing Polyvagal does really well is teaches us how to be compassionate, how to be empathetic. You're using that together to kind of help calm that other person who might be, overstimulated or overwhelmed at that moment. And so that's kind of what that co-regulation means. And that's why generally when you have somebody who is in a high arousal state, over anxiety, overwhelmed, anger, frustration, when they're co-regulating with somebody, when you have somebody able to co-regulate with them and they're able to come in, you will hear them with that softer tone, that lower tone of voice. You'll hear them, start coming up with things like how, kind of helping them kind of see what the situation really truly is, because in that person who's over activated right now, they're not going to be able to see much. Matter of fact, your rational brain, that prefrontal cortex, is kind of offline at that point. So you kind of need that person to kind of help you to kind of slow down a bit, kind of help regulate you so that you can start seeing the situation for what it is. The problem, there is a small problem on this sometimes, and that is if you have had, and I'm again the trauma person, so I'm going to bring trauma into this because I've seen this happen before and everything. But if you are somebody who has had trauma in the past, and that person who maybe traumatized you, or, maybe abused you or something to that extent, and they might have already had that low tone of voice. Somebody coming in to co-regulate with you, and they might have the same tone of voice. That lower tone is going to make your alarms sound even higher and even more. So now that person is no longer safe to you. Even though they're perfectly safe, they have all good intentions, on any other given day that is a safe person to be with. But because of maybe a tone that they came in with on this particular time, it triggered something from your past. So then that co-regulation can't really happen. So there is those little bits and pieces that do kind of come up. But essentially what co-regulation is harmonizing your nervous system with somebody else's. They're able to help you. You're able to help each other. This is that moment where you could have playful, you could be, calm together, party situation, having coffee with a friend, whatever, and everything is good. You're in a good zone. So
I've got a question about that, Annette, and I don't know if there's like research on this or if this is still an area of hypothesis only, but I've noticed that there can be multiple people in my life that have similar, either fill similar roles historically or are similar in some other way, but some of them are so much better at co-regulating with me than others, to the point where it seems almost like it's the basis of that whole like soulmate thing. And I'm wondering if there's any research or any theories or hypotheses about why some people just naturally do that better for each other than others.
Yeah, you're touching on the idea of neuroception, of the way
Yes.
that we have this piece of our brain that's like constantly dedicated to looking for these safety cues and looking for them in the people or the primates or complex mammals around us. One of the reasons therapy animals are so effective is because they're generally all mammals. They're soothing to us because we're able to co-regulate with a dog that doesn't feel stressed about the election or about a global pandemic. And so, so long as he's well fed and taken care of, he's pretty relaxed. And when I am going for a jog with my dog, I feel that relaxed connection with him. The reason why some people have a maybe greater capacity for that is just because that the cues that they're giving off, the safety cues that your neuroception is picking up on, resonate with the safety cues that you're looking for. And a lot of that can be because this is somebody who is maybe really aware of themselves and how they come across, somebody who is big and tall and mindful not to stand in a doorway next to somebody who might potentially feel trapped or traumatized, or just being sort of aware and highly sensitive to the people around them.
Definitely.
Interesting. Awesome.
Well, Annette, I recognize that no two people are going to be able to co-regulate perfectly. You talked about that harmonization piece and how trauma can get in the way, but even outside of that, what does it look like when you're with your partner and you're, way up here on the ladder, feeling pretty like calm, cool, collected, curious, and connected to one another, and your partner is just down in a pit, down at like the bottom of the ladder, feeling exhausted? How does that reflect itself in the relationship?
It can be very much a there's going to be a lot of disconnect there, and there can be a lot of misreadings as well. I have people who actually have said that person is way too happy for me, and they're resentful. In all honesty,
Yeah.
so you'll see a lot of people in these relationships that become very, there's a lot of arguing going on. There's a lot of, because one side feels like you don't understand what I'm going through. The other side is saying the same thing. And you tend to have people who, if you don't talk to one another, that's a big piece. Talk to your partner and get to know them. I think on a deeper level, and get to know what it is that they're, what are their triggers? What are those things that help regulate them? Why are they so down? And, we've got people who might be over functioning and people who are under functioning. Those over functioners are the ones who have high stress, high anxiety. They feel like they're taking on everything in the world, and then they're resentful to their partner who might be under functioning, and they might be just kicking back, laying back. They're kind of in that calm zone, that ventral vagal. They're just cruising through, and kind of like, I don't feel like I need to do too much because this person's already doing it. So then you have these people who now just want to argue back and forth. You don't do enough. You don't care. You don't. And so then there's misconceptions. It's not that I don't care about you. It's just you're going around doing all this stuff. So I don't have really anything to do. So I'm going to kick back with a, cup of coffee and a book and catch you later. And that person's saying, well, I see you as being lazy, sitting there drinking coffee and reading a book while I'm doing everything around the house. I'm doing this or I'm doing that. So it becomes this argumentative state, and it becomes, they can't co-regulate with one another, because the over-functioning person is too far over to help. The ventral vagal person can't pull them into calm, and the calm person can't be pulled up a little bit to kind of get motivated to kind of help out and do some things, because they're just too far apart sometimes on that ladder that we talked about earlier. So it becomes very difficult. It's not impossible. Again, communication. Social creatures, communication. And I think we forget about that all the time. I even know for myself, I have to make sure that, I talk to my husband and let him know this is the states that I might be in when this occurs. When I was at my height, I function now very easygoing, pretty much. Again, I have regulated, my system kind of regulates on its own, but that was because I've done a lot of work on my stuff and I got my shit together. But back in the day, I used to be very high anxiety. Everything stressed me out. I was actually clinically diagnosed with anxiety and depression. I've gone through a lot to where every little thing, I was on such a high thing constantly, of stressors. The alarms were going off like crazy. And my husband was quite the opposite. He was quite very much, he was in ventral vagal state, almost, I could probably say sometimes probably dorsal vagal, really. So again, it became just conversing with him, letting him know this is what I need. This is what's happening to me. And so then we were able to kind of come together. We were able to kind of work together and say, okay, so now I know what's going on with him. I know what's going on with her, or, whatever partner's relationship you've got going on, whatever family relationships. I work a lot with families. Who was the same way. They had, the parent and the child, they were both unable to co-regulate because of situations in the past and everything. So you're going to see a lot of disassociation, a lot of isolation, a lot of argumentative things not getting done, not getting changed because people are just at each other constantly because they're not on the same, what we call wavelength. And in this case, it's that neuro, that wavelength. They're not on the same page. And if you're close enough, you can kind of help each other out. But when you're farther apart, that's when we run into some troubles. It's not impossible, but it definitely can add to the stressors of a relationship, whether it be a romantic relationship, a family relationship, even a work relationship with coworkers and bosses and things of that nature. So this is where self-regulation can kind of help come in, knowing how to self-regulate yourself so that then you can kind of get close enough together to where you can then, I always look at it as a magnet in a way. Once you get a little close enough, you've got that magnet
Pull
that
into each other,
connects you so that you can now help each other out. But at the basis, communication. And really, when we're talking polyvagal, that's exactly what it is. That system's keeping us safe, but we need others to help us as well. And that's that social aspect. And so communicate with your partners, and it's okay. And that's something really big that I am trying to get across to the world, so to speak, is let's normalize mental health and make it okay for us to talk about. And that's something that's big, because a lot of people, they grow up being told we don't talk about that, or they don't believe in that, or something like that. And so it becomes very shameful. I don't want to tell my spouse or my mom or my whatever about my issues that I'm having, because it becomes a moment of shame in there. And shame tells you in our minds that you're a bad person. You're not a bad person, but that's how our brains kind of interpret things. So we need to make it safe, again, for us to be able to communicate. And again, that comes into that ventral vagal and that social engagement. Is this a safe person, a safe place, environment for me to come and open up and talk about, so that I can get the help that I need, and as well as I can help those that I love as well.
Yeah, well, we've got a small stack of callers that are building up, but as much as I want to ask you like 47 more questions, let me narrow it down to just one. Do you have any tips for us in, I guess, how to recognize where our partner is at and how they're regulating, and maybe it's just some tips on accommodating them when they're maybe lower down the ladder than we are?
Yes. Again, it comes down to that communication and being able to talk with your whoever it is, whether it be your partner or your family or your coworkers, whoever in your group you're trying to work within. A lot of times we're talking relationships with partners, spouses, or whatnot. And so one of the things is we need to be self-aware of ourselves first, so that we know what's going on. Once we understand what's going on, then we can talk to our partners about what's going on. We can then start recognizing in them what's going on. So that's really key to a lot of things. And then again, going back to that communication. Is this person safe for me to talk to? And if so, this is what I'm going to talk about. And letting that person know this is what I need during these moments. I am somebody who will use for self-regulation and whatnot. A lot of times I will use yoga, meditation, and mindfulness, Those are my big ones that I go through. And because of that, I have people who will sit there and say, oh, well, that's the hippie stuff. And again, they kind of poo-poo it. And you're like, but this is what works for me. So this is when I tell my husband, in the mornings, I need to take X amount of times, in the morning or in the evening, I'm going to come over here, and this is what I need to do for this amount of time. I need to come do my meditation for 20 minutes or whatever. So I'm going to go take care of that. And so he knows, though, because of communication, that this is something that I need. Now, in addition to that, again, talking about relationships and talking about, what I need as far as if my stressors go off, again, talking to your partner is really important. I am somebody who is a sexual assault survivor. And with that, I have certain things that I have to make sure that I have put in place, in our home, to where I have during those moments of relationship times, to where I need to make sure that I have a certain candle possibly, or certain music. Those are safeguards that I put into place so that I can keep myself in that calm ventral vagal zone. And I've spoken to my spouse, let him know that this is what I need. So he's okay with all of this, even though it's the fruity candles or the flower candles, and he's just like, whatever. But also letting him know what are some of those triggers that might trigger me. And this is what, so sometimes it can take a little bit of the romance away, but also this is building that safety zone. And eventually it becomes something that it's just automatic, and it becomes something that's just normal now. And it is not so much thought out anymore and so much planned. It just becomes a way of life, because we've now been able to co-regulate. He knows what I need. He knows, not only what I need from him, but what I need from my environment to make it a safe place. So again, that comes down to that communication. So, and co-regulation, and even just, again, setting scenes and stuff. When I'm going to, or I have clients who will be stressed out at going to specific events. We just had Thanksgiving. I had clients like crazy who was just, I'm scared to death to go home to my families because of all the stuff that was going on and everything. And so it was making that plan ahead of time, and who can you co-regulate with? What kind of, there isn't anybody you can co-regulate with, what are you going to do to self-regulate yourself when you start feeling yourself slipping into this zone or anything? So really being able to set yourself up for success before you even go is going to be key as well. And again, it's that communication. And I had some people that we had to talk to. I had to help them talk to their family beforehand to let them know this is, I'm coming in and this is going to be an issue. But, so again, setting that stage of this is what I need. And it goes back to being okay with us being able to ask of this and let people know that this is what I'm going through and this is what I need. And I would appreciate if you can help me with this. And, and so that's where breaking that stigma of mental health is going to come in later. I'm hoping that one day it will become this normalized thing that, mental health is a real thing. And we understand more that people are going through stressors and childhood trauma is real and things of that nature, and understanding just more about that and how we can help each other out through those moments.
Well, this feels like a good time to remind people of the episode we did with you back in May, I believe, as you were talking about different grounding exercises and different ways to kind of self-regulate and bring your nervous system down to a more manageable place. So I'll make sure to put that in the footnotes to this episode, as well as, of course, links to your sites and some of these resources. But in the meantime, V, who should we talk to first?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's talk with Turquoise. Turquoise has been waiting for a little bit, and she is a repeat caller, I believe. Turquoise, welcome back to the show.
Hello. I would like to say this has to be the most fascinating episode that I've heard in a while.
Well, there you go, Annette.
Yay!
Yeah,
Awesome.
and if Sam is still listening, I wish them good luck. You have my condolences.
Yeah,
But I wish
Sam is
that
gonna
good luck.
have something to do this Christmas for sure. I hope they call back and let us know how it goes. I know you're calling back. We had a conversation before. Do you want to kind of briefly go over what your last conversation with us was about, so the audience is all caught up with us?
Sure. Yeah, I called in last about 2 weeks ago because I've just been confused about the concept of non-binary genders, because essentially the mindset that I've always grew up with was that it doesn't matter what you are biologically speaking or like physically what you are. It should not define what your interests, personality, affectations, anything you want to put under that list. And I thought you shouldn't put any sort of expectations as to what a boy or a girl is. So the concept of having this third, and what I always thought was that gender should just be a synonym for sex. Which had me confused on why some people are coming up with this idea of a non-binary gender, or rather a gender that is not in between male or not male or female. I listened over the last conversation, and my girlfriend listened to the call as well, and we talked about this after. And she and I were just talking about different aspects of ourselves that we considered either masculine or feminine, or maybe neither. And we were talking about how frustrated we've often been with expectations that have been placed on us based on our sex. And I think I realized that's basically what my problem stemmed from. What I've been afraid of with the concept of non-binary genders is that I felt like it was essentially saying that girls who do not act what is quote unquote feminine enough aren't girls, and boys who don't act quote unquote masculine enough aren't considered boys, which would make people feel like they have to fit some sort of standard that they really don't have to fit. It's because I've always felt like, or at least in my experience with gender, is that it was oppressive. It's kind of like what Sam was mentioning on the last call. He mentioned that that part where I believe is one of his family members, one of their family members, I forgot, was that she had a boyfriend who wore pink socks, and his grandmother thought it was the end of the world or something. Oh my God,
Right.
men can't wear pink socks.
Right, exactly.
Who thought of this idea?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think it was Chelsea in that previous call. They mentioned that something about the difference between gender roles and gender identity that kind of had this light in my head that kind of straightened things out for me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have, and I think it's going to vary a little bit based on the person you're talking to. I know my experience as a non-binary person is extremely different than someone else's, right? And with that comes my own take. But this is me trying to explain my experience. So before we jump into anything else, I just want to make sure that we understand that. So here's where I come down on this. And I'm going to use a recent event to kind of highlight the difference here. There are expectations that are placed on gendered people to act in accordance with that gender. Absolutely. And a lot of them are ridiculous. Men cannot wear pink socks is ridiculous. For a very long time, the actor now known as Elliot Page identified publicly as a lesbian woman. And they were treated as such, and they were given a platform, they were given fame, they were a role model for a certain LGBTQ community, or a subsection of that community. And that was how people interacted with them. And this week, they came out as trans non-binary. Their pronouns are he, them. And they changed their name to Elliot. And that is something that they needed. They were already defying a lot of the stereotypes that came with being perceived as a woman. They were interested in other women. They would, dress super butch sometimes. They had this cool androgynous thing going on, right? And there were all of these things that they were doing that was just not quite what that gender was expected. But it was also, hold on, got myself wrapped up in a loop here. They were defying gender expectations as a lesbian woman, as somebody perceived as that. That was not enough for them, clearly. That was not who they were. They felt the need to embrace who they were as a transmasculine non-binary person. Now, what that means for them, I can't say. Whether or not they suffer from dysphoria, I can't say. Whether or not it's going to be difficult for them to reprise roles like Vanya in Umbrella Academy and portray a cis woman as a transmasc non-binary person, I don't know. It might be difficult. It might not. I personally don't have a lot of dysphoria, but I know other non-binary people who really, really do. And so that's the key difference there, right? Nobody is saying that because you defy certain gender norms, you have to identify in any way. And there are always going to be people who continue to identify as cis and just, break some of those norms, some of those expectations. And then there are going to be other people for whom that's not enough, for whom that is not accurate to who they are. And that might be the first, little light bulb that, oh, maybe it's not just that I don't like certain elements of what is expected of this gender. I am not this gender at all. So it's complicated and certainly can't be boiled down to ones and zeros, at least not yet. But that's kind of where I'm coming from. Does that make sense?
I think that makes a lot of sense. That I think that puts a really good point to it, because I remember last time we spoke, you gave me the ice cream analogy. And I think a question that came up in my head was, like, for example, like, let's say you got chocolate ice cream and everybody perceives chocolate ice cream to have 75% cacao or more in it. And then suddenly you have this scoop of ice cream that is only 60% cacao or 50% cacao. It still you could say, some people would say, like, you could probably say, oh, it still looks or tastes like chocolate ice cream, but it doesn't really follow the recipe. Or do we have to consider this part of the recipe, or do we have to, or like what level of usefulness does this recipe have now? So I think that was something that really touched upon it based on what type of expectations other people have based on gender.
I really like that, actually, that extrapolation of the ice cream analogy, saying, okay, well, currently we have this understanding of what comprises a batch of chocolate ice cream. This is the percentage. That's cool. What happens when 1% gets knocked off, right? What if it's only 74% cacao, right? And then it's kind of a ship of Theseus issue as well there, where it's like, how much do you take away before something is completely different? And is it a single percentage point that is differentiating one thing from another? And here's where we get into, again, pragmatics and semantics and linguistic philosophy, which I absolutely love, because ultimately, a lot of this just comes down to the fact that we don't have a very precise language. We use words in weird ways that overgeneralize about a lot of things, and it's useful because we can have conversations in a meaningful way. We're not like the Ents that spend 5 hours saying good morning. But at the same time, that leaves us open to questions like certain paradoxes, right? Or the ship of Theseus, and this concept of, oh, a thing can only be a thing for as long as it fits in this specific definition, and then it has to be something else. Another option would be to expand the definition, right? And so we're faced with different areas of ways to approach this. But the bottom line here is that we should be respecting individual people, right? Whether that means creating new words or making room in old words, or just specifying words and adding them together in new ways to highlight the differences that make us all individuals. The point is to be open and excited to meet someone who's different than you.
Yeah, and
Okay.
serving a little bit of a function so that we have a word that means white chocolate that is not the same as the words for dark chocolate, so that we don't have to sit here and say, well, she's chocolate, but she's just like kind of chocolate. She's only 50% chocolate. And, we used to kind of do that with words like tomboy and some of these other ideas. And we don't have to, we can add to our language. We can have more flavors and have more discrete categories as just a better way of describing and understanding these things. Now, I don't want to get too far afield from all of this as we're kind of wrapping it up, but I think another really important cannonball to throw into this conversation and really mix things up is just to remember that our sex is not binary either. That we are not genetically speaking either male or female in that very, very simple either or kind of way. And so when we're talking about our gender as being perhaps related to our sex or perhaps related to our genetic identity, that there's actually a lot more to our sex and that our gender is going to reflect that as well.
When you say that, do you also? Are you saying that because there are also people who are intersex? Because I remember that I forgot to even mention that on my last call.
Intersex is certainly a aspect of this conversation. We've actually covered this a lot on the show, and I want to be mindful of our time tonight, but I will definitely put in the show notes to this episode a piece that I've written just sort of explaining how sex is not binary, that it is bimodal, and that our genetic heritage is a lot more complicated than just XX or XY.
You wouldn't happen to be with Valence Counseling, would you?
Yes, that is my handle.
Okay. Okay. I think you left an article in the comments of the last conversation that we had. But
yeah,
okay.
That may be
but anyway,
to take a look at. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if I could ask one last thing before I go, I remember Chelsea. I don't know if Chelsea was serious when they said that they wanted to talk to me. I don't know if there's a way I would be able to get into contact with them. Does Secular Sexuality have an email or something that I can send something to?
Well, we do have an email, but that just goes to me and Christy. A better way to probably get in touch with other people who have been on the show is to get involved in either our Discord or the Facebook group, because most of the conversations that happen about the show, either with guests or with people who have been listening in, happen there. So ACA Discord is the place to go for that, or our Facebook group.
Okay, great. Thank you.
For sure. Thanks for calling in again, Turquoise.
Okay, thank you. Y'all have a good night, and thanks. And by the way, I want to thank you very much for your patience last time when I called. I listened to get on the call, and I did not realize just how insufferable my stutter was. So
oh no, I didn't even notice it.
It's a
You're
stressful
good.
situation. Yeah, I appreciate you being brave enough to call in and talk about some difficult things. So thank you.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump real quick to, I think, someone who will be our last call tonight, just because we are running short on time. We have one more thing to talk about with Annette. This is actually somebody who has been on the show a couple of times. So let's talk with Billy in Texas. Billy, welcome to the show.
Hi. It's kind of interesting being on this perspective now. Yeah, but no, I'm really enjoying the discussion on the polyvagal theory. But I also wanted to kind of throw in one of the things that I get from a lot of clients is that they'll say like, oh, my trauma is not that bad. Why, they minimize their trauma. And it's like, I'm just overreacting. And one of the things I just want to put out there is that, so my experience in the Coast Guard, I would have some PTSD stuff. And I also have difficulty with social anxiety. And both of those things, whenever I was experiencing them at their worst, felt the exact same. And I thought that was just like something that was just so interesting. Just like, it doesn't matter because physiologically, your body's telling you it's the exact same thing.
Mhm.
Even
Yeah,
if
and
it
we like to tell
seems like
people,
it.
"Oh, you're just being shy. Oh, you're just a nerd. Like, go out there, have fun." I mean, that's basically the plot to like 97% of all movies aimed at teenagers. Is just if you loosen up, that you'll be fine at parties. But yeah, it's worthwhile to acknowledge that these things matter, that these things are significant, and they're actual barriers.
Absolutely. It's just one of those things. I just want to kind of put that out there for people that have thought about counseling but haven't done counseling, that your what you're going through is legitimate.
Mhm.
Please don't minimize it. Please go out there and talk about it and kind of work through the things that you need to work through.
Definitely. And I know for myself, I'm sorry, I've had clients that came in with one thing, and just through working with them, we uncover like several more things that they never thought were trauma. They never
Mm.
thought that was, oh really, that's what's keeping me, holding me back from this or that. And they never thought about it because it was minimized always in their life, and it was something that was looked at as, that's just part of who you are, that's how you grew up, that's how I am. So it does get minimized, and so I appreciate what what Billy has just said.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and that's pretty much just what I wanted to do, and just kind of just say hi to all y'all, and yeah, just enjoying the show.
That's
Sure. Well,
awesome,
thank you so
Billy.
much for joining us. It's an important reminder to take our mental health seriously and to recognize
Exactly.
that trauma is valid.
I love that. Well, hopefully we'll have you on again soon, Billy.
That would be nice. I'd love to, talk to y'all. I don't know. There's just something about just getting some of that socialness of interacting with y'all and having
Right?
fun on
We
the
all
show.
need it.
It's that ventral
Absolutely.
vagal. It's that connection piece. We need that
Yeah,
social
it's
piece.
what makes us human.
There you go.
Absolutely. All
All
right.
right.
Take
Well, have a
care.
good
Have
rest
a
of your
great
night, Billy.
All right. You too.
Bye.
Good night.
All right. We are out of calls for tonight.
Yeah, and it's about time to start wrapping up. There's definitely so much more that I want to cover. But Annette, I guess I would just be curious to hear what you would describe as sort of the broad takeaways or the applications of polyvagal theory, because we've hit on just the tip of the iceberg for what some of these things can do or say. But if somebody wanted to really dive into this, how can they maybe apply it to their lives?
Really understand. I mean, tonight, like you said, there's so much to this polyvagal theory, our nervous system, and trauma, and all this stuff. I mean, everything can kind of, once you start learning how things connect with one another, it becomes quite amazing. And for me, even when I started learning all these different pieces, things just started making sense. And once things started making sense to me, then it got me excited. I wanted to try this out. I wanted to work on this and fix this over here and that over there, and everything just started coming together, and that was the exciting part. I love when I see my clients and that happens. They start coming together with all of those pieces, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that this was with that. And we talk about how things kind of fit together, and so much of our mental health actually affects our physical health. And we know things like stress and stuff can lead to heart disease and that type of diabetes and things. But a lot of people have no idea that chronic stress actually can be a contributing factor to irritable bowel syndrome and things of that nature. So fibromyalgia was something that is just considered to be, oh, I'm just in pain. Well, you might have some mental stuff going on that's causing that to happen. And once people start figuring out and realizing all the pieces put together, it's like, oh my gosh, why didn't I know this before? And so I love those moments of aha from my clients. I've had those myself. And so I think the biggest takeaway from tonight really is starting to understand what's going on in your body. with your stress alarms and stuff, and then starting to look into why is those stress alarms going off, and then learning more of what kind of things like grounding or self-regulation or co-regulation, what can I do now to pull myself out when I start slipping. And again, you have to know when you're slipping to know how to get out of slipping. So really tonight I'm hoping that what's the beginning takeaway is for people to start understanding, to start listening to their bodies, start realizing that, what you might think as just your way of life is actually not what's supposed to be happening, was not what you're supposed to be feeling, and and start looking at things a little bit through a different lens, so to speak. And then there's of course reaching out to get help and support. If you don't have anybody that you can reach out and get help and support from, definitely look at different places that you can reach out and get support. There's plenty of counselors and coaches and therapists and stuff that are out there. Find somebody who you feel safe with that is going to work with you to help you. Maybe you just need a little bit of help to where you're able to kind of unravel some of what's in front of you as to why things are happening to you. Why are you feeling a certain way? And I know I'm overly stressed or anxious about something, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to, resolve it or whatnot. So reaching out and getting that help and support, and that support might even be from a really good friend or somebody, of that nature. But there's always, of course, counselors, therapists, and stuff that can also help with some of the bigger things that you might need that support from. In resiliency, one of the things when I'm teaching resiliency is looking for those support systems, whether it be organizations, people, individuals. Support groups are really great, or even not even a support group necessarily, but maybe finding a group that shares your same interests, and being just in that group, you're now able to, you're going to get that social interaction. You're going to get that co-regulation. You're going to start feeling great because you're around people who are all feeling great as well. And again, now your nervous systems are going to start resonating with one another. So I'm hoping people can start looking at things through a different lens. And, and of course, there's other information out there. The internet is filled with things. Dr. Deb Dana has some great stuff. Dr. Porges, there's tons of great literature and information out there to even delve in further. I know when I first started going into, trauma work and everything, I ended up down some rabbit holes that was like, I went into the epigenealogy of trauma even. There's so much out there, but as a lifelong learner, for me, that's not something new. I constantly learning and reading and getting more knowledge. And the thing about mental health is it takes roughly about 20 years for different theories to be tested out and to different things to be looked at and processed through, and before they're even brought out to the public. So what we might think is something brand new today that we're just now learning, like trauma is something we're just now starting to learn about, this was actually started way back in the 60s and even beyond that. People, coming back from war years and years and years ago were being studied on their PTSD and things of that nature. So, but we're just now starting to hear these words like trauma and things of that nature. So, there's a lot out there, and there's a lot more work being done now. And so I just hope people had a chance to hear something that might have sparked an interest to learn a little bit more, dig a little deeper, kind of look at things with their own self and maybe with those others around them. Again, it's not what's wrong with them. It might be something's happened to them, and being able to be in that space to talk about it and, start to unravel that so that, you can start getting better mental health, which is going to become better overall health, better relationships, and so on.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of different books and some different names, Dr. Stephen Porges and Dr. Deb Dana's, a handful of other really fascinating reads out there. And we'll make sure to have links to some of those in the show notes to this episode. Outside of that, where can people find out more about you and about the things that you offer?
I can be found online. I have a website, clipslifecoach.com. I also am on Facebook. You can find me there with the Clips Life Coach, where I post a lot of information. I do a lot of workshops. I have a workshop coming up actually on the nervous system coming up actually in a couple weeks, that's leading into an even bigger workshop. We're going to be doing like a new year, new you, where I'm going to be teaching a month-long workshop for all of January. Very interactive and stuff. So it's very exciting. I do see people on a one-on-one basis. I have people who will be with me every week. I have some people who are with me maybe every other week. Depending on what it is that they're needing. Whether it's I'm trying to unravel what's going on emotional with me and kind of getting myself centered, to I'm trying to reach this goal and I keep getting stuck. And what's sticking them is something to do with their past traumas or things of that nature. So I'm kind of able to step in. I'm kind of a best of both worlds, so to speak. I can help you in the coaching, moving you forward with whatever goals and stuff you might want, but I also have the education and background in emotional trauma and counseling to where I'm able to help support them in that as well. So if something comes up that they're like, this is an emotional trauma issue, I utilize a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy work and things of that nature. So, reach out to me online. I'm great with answering questions. Sometimes people will just email me a quick question and I'm like, I'll shoot them back an answer. We don't necessarily
Why
have
not?
to set up a session, why not? I'm helping out people all the time. I'm on TikTok, not as I don't do so much TikToking, I should say, but I am on there supporting people, and when they're reaching out because they need some support. So I'm all about support. My passion, my purpose, everything is wrapped up in helping people and helping them with their mental health. And I want to see people to be able to regulate themselves and live a happy, healthy life and be able to have good relationships and be able to live in a world to where it's not so scary and they can be well. And that's my pie in the sky thought, but I do know that it's possible. I do it myself. I have countless of clients. I've got over 9,000 client hours under my belt, and I have countless clients all the way from teenagers up to well into seniorhood of adults that I've been able to help. And I have to say, it's never too late. Never think that, oh, well, I'm older now and I can't change. This is just the way I've grown up. Hey, I didn't start really taking my mental health seriously until much later in life. And I was that counselor who was helping everybody else out, but I wasn't helping myself. So one of those types
Yeah, that
of things.
resonates just a little bit.
Right? So it's like the old adage of the shoemaker who his kids don't have any shoes. I was the counselor who was helping everybody out except myself, and I had to start taking my own advice. So I lived what I teach, and I am very open and transparent with all of my clients, as you saw a little bit tonight. I get down in the dirt with them as well. And I always tell my clients, you're lucky I lived a crappy life at times. I've gone through some stuff. So I can, whatever you've going through or whatever you've gone through, I usually have something that it resonates with me, that I can say, you know what, I maybe not have gone in those shoes, but this is what happened with me, or, and so I can tell them how I was able to help myself and everything. So, reach out to me online, clipslifecoach.com, and we can go from there.
Yeah, well, and we've talked a lot about community tonight. And V, I know you pointed Turquoise towards our Discord server as well as our fan group on Facebook. Where else can people find Secular Sexuality and the ACA online?
Yeah, well, if you are here, you already know how to find our YouTube. But if you want to get in touch with us on Twitter, we are at Secular Sex. If you want to email us for questions or things that you would like clarification on, anything we've talked about tonight or at any other point in time, you can email us at sex@atheist-community.org. We also have a helpline where you can leave us a voicemail that we will play on the episode and answer on air. And that number is 512-666-0ASK. It's 512-666-0275. We are in the process of trying to build another mailbag episode, hopefully for the end of the year. We have a lot of really good questions that came up last mailbag episode over Thanksgiving that we didn't get to last time, but will be included this time. If you have other things you would like us to talk about during that mailbag episode or just in general, we'd love to hear from you. And that's how you get in touch with us, the hosts. If you would like to get in touch with the community that is surrounding secular sexuality and making it possible every week, you can reach us at the Discord, which is tiny.cc/ACA Discord. There's a lot of conversation happening there. And some nights we'll go and do an after show and just talk with people a little bit. So make sure to check that out. And then we also have a Facebook group that is run by the fans. So this is not an official ACA Facebook group. This is where all of the fans get together and chat about some really awesome topics that our mods put together. And that is facebook.com/groups/secularsexfg. And yeah, you have a myriad number of ways to get in touch with this group and continue this conversation. Can we
that in addition to your email questions, we would love, as we're wrapping up this year, to hear about your favorite episodes or maybe your least favorite. You know, if there was a moment from Secular Sexuality this year that you want more of, that you want to talk about again, that you want to never hear anything positive said about, we'd love to hear that as well. But V, I didn't mean to scoop you there. What's next?
Oh, just wanted to make sure we're giving our crew cam a shout out tonight as well before we head out. Our lovely crew.
Incredible cast of folks that help us put this together. Thank you all so much tonight.
Those two circled blue dots are very important. They do a lot here.
Well, we'd love to hear from you in all of these different ways through the Facebook group, through your emails. We're getting ready for these mailbag episodes and everything else. But for tonight, you know, I'd like to thank V and Annette so much for being here. I'd like to thank the rest of the crew for helping us put this together. And then take a moment to just encourage everybody to go out and give themselves a big old orgasm. Or better yet, give somebody else one.